All right. So, my next job, we're going to talk about the oil and gas industry, the oil field. I'm sure people that know of it know it's long. It can be long, strenuous hours. There's two sides of this sword. There's a lot of pros to the oil field. There's a lot of stuff I liked and I missed. I liked the people. They were hard workers. A lot of those guys would live in there. You know, I work to live. I don't live to work. But I got a taste of it for 2.5 years, 2.5 to 3 years. I was in the oil industry. My buddy got me in, and oddly enough, you need like 6 months experience to get hired. I got in through referral. I think I became a pretty good valve tech. I worked on fracking valves. I maintenance them in the shop. I was only out on pad several times, which means like out in the fracking areas. So I worked locally at my shop. A lot of pros, a lot of cons. The pros, you got after 6 months, you started with 4 weeks of PTO, depending on the year. You bought 2 weeks. Then you got 6 paid sick days. Really nice. The insurance was pretty good. The 401k was pretty good. And that in those regards, it was great. They would cook out for us when they could. That was cool. It was like open house. You know, if you got called in to move a truck, you did 10 minutes of work, you get paid 2 hours of overtime. Really good labor incentives there. You had your holidays paid. If work was slow and there was a lot of snow, they'd shut down work, that type of stuff. But trying to think of other pros. Like I'm very adept with like heavy equipment, impact guns, swinging sledgehammers, very technical work with the valves. Everything had to be to spec. At times it was quite hard work. I remember going in the summer and being drenched like I took a shower within like an hour. We had to wear FR, fire resistant, fire retardant clothing. You know, that was heavy. It was a dirty job, very greasy because the inside of the valves were pumped with grease. It was very, very dirty job. I did it. I got through with it. In 2020 when COVID hit and the elections coming up, the place sort of ended up leaving, but there were layoffs and stuff in the process. And honestly, my time was up there. And you'll understand why. Like what happens in there when it's busy, when it's not busy, you're working your eights, you got your PTO, life's good. But when it is busy, it is ruthless. I would work 8 to 4, get called back in at 6 and be there till 2 in the morning. I've worked several 24, 25 hours straight, like 8 a.m. all the way to like 7 a.m., 8 a.m. all the way to like 9 a.m. I've done it. I've never worked like 30. I know some of the guys have done that. Is it legal in certain states? I'm not even sure. It's probably against OSHA, anything more than 16. But I've done it. When they wanted you to drive out the pad, you went. It's even in the clause when you're hired, like you're pretty much on 24/7. Now, the way it worked, they started rotating every other weekend. You were on call. But like I'd get home exhausted and Saturday morning, hey, everyone needs to be in. You know what I mean? Friday night, hey, everyone needs to be in. And that got old so quick. And for me, the cons outweighed the pros long term. Like I always knew once I was out, I wouldn't go back unless I had to. Like now with Trump winning and frack booming again, if I lost my current job, I'd probably go back for the money. But the money was good, and that's only because of the overtime, right? The overtime is what made the money good. If they were paying what we should have been paid, I would have been making insane money. But they don't want to pay you a really good wage because they know all the overtime you're going to be making. But you got all the typical, holidays. And, you had to work them if it was busy. But yeah, the busy seasons, man, it was rough in there. I hated getting texts to go in. And a lot of people would like lie or just say they're drinking or, they can't make it in. A lot of people would do that. And it would tick a lot of people off. And then you get it. But I did it for almost 3 years. And I do not want to go back, especially now that I'm in distribution, a really good distribution job that I feel treats us well. I'm finally happy to work for a certain company, In the oil field, it was cool to say because people knew you made money, you were a hard worker, but you had to live in there sometimes. And did I miss it? I missed some of it, and I missed some of the people in there. A lot of hard workers. I met a lot of cool guys. I was actively drinking when I was there too. If you know my channel at all, it's big on sobriety now, and I was drinking quite a bit the whole time. But yeah, man, the on-call, the hours, I get people that don't mind living in there. I get why they do it, but that was the part of me that was like, man, this isn't going to be forever. It's just not going to be forever. And then after 2020, I went back into metal fab and assembly, which was paying quite a bit more than the time I was there before. I think I was gone for about 6 years. And when I went back, their minimum was quite a bit higher, and I became a lead, floor lead. I bumped up, and my immediate supervisor bumped me up in pay quite a bit. So I was making out okay. It was local. We'll talk about that next. It's more of a factory work category. So I went from the oil field back to factory work. And there's pros and cons to that too, which we'll talk about in the next video. Oil field, another thing. It was probably the most dangerous job I've ever had, but you got desensitized to it. I remember me and my buddies when we went in there, when we were hired on from orientation, it was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die in here. You're hoisting up 5,000 pound, 10,000 pound valves, 10, 15K pound valves, and you're flipping them, you're touching the valves to make them go down, and you leverage them down. I never had any issues, but these things would pancake you if there was an error, if anything messed up. I've seen 2 occasions someone was actuating a valve and they had a jack underneath on the oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've been in there. It's called a gate, which is the center of the valve that actuates, and they had a jack underneath it. So when they actuated it with air, it went down, and this is like a 7,000 pound valve, okay? And he was a green hat. He was a newbie. We didn't have enough white hats to circumvent all the green hats. You're supposed to have a 1-to-1 ratio. And the valve came up off the table and flew out and broke through the gate. And if it would have went towards him, he tried to reach for the air, and everyone's screaming, don't grab it, don't grab it. But it hit. Everyone was fine. But if it would have went towards anybody, it would have killed them. And I also saw a group of people hoisting. They were using a hoist. And when you screw these things in to hoist from, when you're going top to down, they can hold like 4 times the amount of weight. And they went in from the sides, okay? And they double hooked the hoist on and went up. So the weight was dispersed like this instead of straight up and down. They could snap a lot easier this way. They're called clevises, I believe. So they were improperly hoisting, which in reality, you can hoist a lot of things this way and get away with it, but it was the entire top half of a valve. So you're looking at probably hundreds of pounds, if not 1,000 pounds. And when they had this thing up, they were inside the valve doing something. People were under this and everything. And thankfully, no one was working under it at the time, but it snapped and fell and cracked onto the valve. And you're talking everyone would have lost their hands and arms, or whoever would have been under it would have died instantly. Like I've seen, that was another close call. I personally dumped a valve off a table because we were dropping the top of the valve in to get the gate down. If you know what these things are, you'd understand. But I was fork dropping. I would go in with the forks, lift it up. He doesn't want me to hold him. And I would speed out, and it would drop down, and it was the most efficient way to bring weight down onto the gate to get it down. But it caught the forks, which it would have happened to anybody. The forks that I was using had 2 holes in it, and it just hit them and pulled the whole valve off. I remember my green hat at the time was like, oh my God, like he was shocked. But as it was falling back, I reversed and I just floored it back and got out of the way. That probably would have killed me or broke my legs, smushed my legs permanently. That was a bad incident. Other than that, there were other stories that happened to people. But yeah, I got through without injury. A lot of people did, but there were some close calls. It could have went either way in there. So yeah, it was very dangerous. It was the job where I was like, man, you know, metal fab, yeah, you get cuts. You can get in. People, you know, if you're not watching the shears, you can lose a finger or a limb. But that's common sense not to do that. Like this could happen just through a really simple error. You're using interpack guns on bolts, which like tons of pressure to tighten these valves to spec. One guy crushed his finger in one of them. But yeah, that's about it for the oil field. It was dangerous, but you get desensitized to it. I would go in every day, flip these valves and work on these valves. Pressure too. The pressure inside the valves are dangerous. We had a backtail fly across the shop. Almost hit me in the knee. It probably would have shattered my kneecap. Another thing. I forget what that was that flew. But I remember the guy training me almost crapped himself because he didn't actuate the valve to get the pressure out. And he was like, oh, man, I messed up. But everything was okay. Yeah. Man, screw that job looking back. Like, for real. And then when COVID hit, they stripped the 401k from people, lacked their hours out. I'm so glad I was out of there during COVID. So, yeah. That's the oil field. I'm glad I went through it. It makes me appreciate my job that I have now, which is amazing. And we'll talk about that too in a future video. Take it easy.